Hey, now, Caro, let's go through it. What's your first thoughts? You've just heard two respected voices in football. Lee Matthews, there could be no higher authority to come in and to say those type of things. And then you've got, of course, Jack Riewoldt, who I thought argued very well for the players there.
Well, I'm going to go into that in a moment, but I think, Ed, the interesting thing that's happened today is, and you met with Gillon McLachlan, you've had 1,000 meetings today, I'm sure, but Gillon McLachlan told the club presidents that the 20% pay cut he talked about for him and his executive last week will in fact be a lot bigger than that. The whole executive are going to take massive pay cuts now. He's told Paul Marsh to take that back to the players. You tell the players that whatever they give up, I'm giving it up too. The executive will be giving it up as well.
And I think that's part of the problem, Caroline, at the moment, is that the media are reporting what's happening and what they're hearing. But behind the scenes, there is only a small coterie of people who know. And that is...
There's a lot of very angry people behind the scenes. The AFL, I will not accept that the AFL were happy about this. They were furious on Monday when the players not only put forward what they thought was a paltry offer, but then leaked it. They felt, I'm not saying who is right or wrong, but there is anger. There is disgust at some of the clubs that they've had to lay off all these people, and the players are still talking and sounding so entitled.
And at the same time, the clubs were filthy that they thought there was only 20% coming out of headquarters, and the players could say the same thing. The bottom line I think we have to get to on this whole thing, Caroline, is there will be a figure. And it won't be set by the Players Association, and it won't even be set by the AFL.
Well, I agree with that.
It'll be set by the banks.
It's not a negotiation.
No, it's not a negotiation.
Yep.
We are all still trying to this moment to figure out what the money will be, and it'll be predicated on a few different things. One, that there'll be no football this year, and well, actually, there's probably 5 things, and even going into next year there'll be problems, but certainly this year there'll be no football. Number 2, that there'll be football with no crowds. Football with crowds, or football the hybrid of starting the season with no crowds and maybe getting some crowds. And each one of those is worth hundreds of millions of dollars going the wrong way. We don't know whether the members will have a run on the clubs to get their money back. We don't know whether the sponsors are going to do so. So every day that we find a figure, it either gets bigger, smaller by the end of the day. That's the crux of the issue with the Players Association at the moment.
But there has been a bit going on behind the scenes, and we probably should get Sam McClure to tell us
Sam's
about
here.
it.
Sam, you haven't got the age chief football writing position just yet, Kara's told me. You might get it tonight. What's going on?
Well, there is a fair bit of anger behind the scenes, as you mentioned, Caro. Some of that is directed towards the players, some towards the AFL, and as little as half an hour ago, a bit directed towards the media. I've reported a story tonight, essentially the two offers between the players and what they want to do with their pay cut and what the AFL wants to do. Now, as you can see there, the players are willing to take a 50% pay cut for the next 8 weeks. They've also added a sweetener to that in the last few hours, which is foregoing a grant in the low millions of dollars that they would get directly from the AFL. And I've also reported that the AFL's stance, it certainly started there, is a 79% pay cut for the next 7 months. That is until their contracts for the year run out on October 31. Now, just before we went to air tonight, I received a phone call from the AFL Chief Executive, Gillon McLachlan. Fair to say that he wasn't happy. I think my ears are still ringing from that conversation.
So
but he is absolutely refuting the figures, Caro, telling myself that they are factually incorrect. I've gone back to my sources who maintain that that is the figure that has been put to the AFL Players Association. But
so
just to be clear, he is saying it's wrong.
So you're reporting accurately on the information you're getting. You've reported in good faith what Gil said there. I can see both sides of this because I know that Gil hasn't got a figure to put to them yet. They're negotiating on the way through and they've been working it through. They will find that figure, but it is a figure that is a movable feast at the moment.
So why would the Players Association think that they have a figure, Eddie?
All right. Yeah, well, good.
I mean, these figures aren't being made up and are not being plucked out of thin air. But
is that another indication of maybe not only misinformation and miscommunication, but how far apart these... We were hearing things were getting closer, and you believe that, Ed, but maybe they're not getting closer.
No, perhaps not. But I just would like to make a point that Gillon McLachlan is not the type of person that is in the habit of calling something to refute it and say it's factually incorrect, and that's what he's done tonight.
He's not looking. There's no PR in any of this. There's just going to be what happens. But the bottom line again gets down to this, Cara. There won't be a negotiation period because to keep the game alive, there will have to be a decision made at some stage because you're negotiating with the banks and governments and you've got collateral on the line. This is big time stuff. This is not 12 months to get a collective bargaining situation. This is absolutely war footing, and I use the term advisedly, but it is accurate. It is war footy. That is, all bets are off that used to be. We have to survive. The game must survive.
And it's war
everyone
footing.
needs to play its
Go
role.
ahead, Sam.
Eddie and Caro, we should hear from the Players Association because their president, Patrick Dangerfield, conducted a radio interview today on SEN. This is part of what he had to say.
Well, it's being pitched as a paywall, and it's not the case. The facts are that we only know what the next 2 months look like. This is rapidly evolving and has escaped all of it clearly, and that's why we volunteered the 50% at this stage, because we don't know. Are we prepared to take longer-term cuts? Absolutely, but we need a bit more information in regards to where the season is going, the finances of the season, so we can make the right decisions.
So that was an interview that Patrick Dangerfield did with Gerard Whateley on SEN this morning. I think it's now into the second or third year of a deal that those two have had long-standing. I think it's either weekly or fortnightly that they do that deal. But he was doing that interview really, Garrow, with things still moving behind the scenes.
So we've heard players come out and say things and they have not sold this well, and we'll talk about that. But do you think Patrick should have been more vocal and should have been more available to other outlets?
I think Patrick has to be careful, and it's new for him as well. No one knows the conflict of being a club official and being involved in the media more than me. And that's why you always make yourself available on big issues to everybody. Either do a press conference or do every interview that's asked of you. You must do that. You can't just do the one that you get paid for. You might look after them first. You might give them the first one, but you have to be available for everybody. So Patrick's going to do radio interviews. He's got to do them with everyone.
Did you ask this morning on your radio show to have him on?
I think our producers have asked over the last week for him to come on.
Okay.
But I'm not dirty about that. I'm just saying a bit of advice is if you are in these positions and it starts to become a big issue, you must make sure that you do the role of the position as opposed to anything else. And, I think Patrick, let's forget that. I would think what Patrick said there was spot on.
But he said some other things that really rankled with other players and other clubs. He
What was
talked
that,
about,
Karen?
well, there were a few things, but one that a couple of clubs who've just let go 80% of their staff, some temporarily, but some not temporarily, Ed. He talked about, some players are supporting grandparents and family members. Well, people around Australia on $50,000 a year, on $40,000 a year, are supporting grandparents and other family members. And it was just a really unfortunate analogy. It was, it's happened across the board. Nathan Jones went on 3AW, I think it was on Tuesday night, it was on Tuesday night, and said this about the future of the year.
I look forward to playing towards the end of the year. I think however far that goes, I know for sure players are willing to play and put on as much entertainment as possible and play as many games as possible to try and keep this season alive. And whether that's if we're playing right up to Christmas time, I think everyone's willing to do that.
I understand what he's saying, but he's sort of almost saying as though we're willing to do make all these wonderful sacrifices. I don't think they've got the message properly yet, Ed. I don't know how well they've been led.
He's out of contract. I mean, there's several players going into that will be playing in November or December, potentially without a playing contract. I can understand your point of view, and some people see it as selfish, but this is new ground for the players as well.
Let's not forget, that's his world. He goes home with a mortgage and everything as well.
Yep.
I mean, and I'm not cutting them slack there because I genuinely believe, hand on heart, that the players' sacrifice will come. And they're just trying to get to where they need to. When you've got 800 constituents, if you're Paul Marsh, you've got to go back. It's not just like talking to Patrick Dangerfield who's sitting next to you. You've got a lot of people and a myriad of issues to get over and go through. People are scared out there in the football like they are in the general community. But I just hope now that everyone, as has been said 15 times, takes the deep breath, let Gil and Paul Marsh get it sorted out. If there's an impasse, then the bats will come out. But if we can get this sorted in an elegant way and get football to be a leader in the community, which is what everyone's trying to do, and it's happened, as you said, Caro, so eloquently before, at football clubs. It has been heartbreaking this week. This has been the worst week I've ever had in sport.
Those
and
people
business.
haven't had a chance to take a deep breath.
That's it, I know.
And the players have, and people are asking why.
Yeah, but that's where we need to get to.